inviting me and to this important meeting. I will speak in English, and it is somewhat ironic. Why? Because English is the language of a country where the economic science was born, as the economic science as we know it, and that perhaps for that reason did not enter the euro, and is seriously considering to leave the euro. But it is perhaps paradoxical to remark that in order to be understood by the largest share of European citizens, I have to use the language of this country. This is an important lesson for those who believe in the United States of Europe as a real possibility. And there are two lessons in that. The first is that you are a majority of Italian people. So the most democratic solution would be for me to speak in Italian. But I'm giving you a lesson of European politics. I belong to an elite, and I'm proud of it, and I decide for you. And I speak in English. That's the first lesson. The second lesson is that I'm not against Europe. I can travel across Europe and speak in their languages with most of the population I meet. It was very funny when the first time I went in Portugal, and my son told to my wife, "Oh, that's the first country where Dad cannot speak the language of the people we meet." And it's true, because unfortunately I don't speak Portuguese and I don't understand it. But with English, well, you can travel all around the world. So now that's the premise. Let's go ahead with the content of my presentation. I will try to put things in perspective. And the first thing I will show you is that the financial imbalances, so debt crisis, very often come out of income distribution imbalances. This is something that should not be underrated, because it gives us a positive message of what should we do once we leave the euro. The second point is that the alliance between a single currency and economic reform is very uneasy. We were told that single currency would have forced us to make the reform that were badly needed, but you should know now that the economic literature gives us many arguments to put forward the opposite argument, namely that fixed exchange rate or a single currency are very useful tools to delay economic reforms. Then I will move on and give two lessons that we are receipts of the crisis. The first lesson is that we should start from the reform of the labor market at the European level, and of course that we should remove the euro. These are two necessary conditions for the reason that I will quickly show you, and that has partly been explained by Antonio and Claudio. Just a premise. The Eurozone crisis finds its root in private finance. The financial imbalances in the private sector were forced by competitiveness problems and unregulated financial markets. It's completely a fake argument to present the Eurozone crisis as a public debt crisis. And this is not Claudio Borghi Aquilini who made this statement, but it is Vito Constancio. Who is Vito Constancio? He is the vice president of the ECB. So let's hear the word of the Lord with the capital L. Imbalances originated mostly from rising private sector expenditure, point 1. Point 2, financed by the banking sector of the lending and borrowing countries. Point 3, European financial market did not perform according to the theory. Let me add a cautionary remark. According to his theory, because many economists have foreseen what is happening now. 4th point, exposure to stressed countries more than quintuplet. And this is what Claudio showed. by the way, showing that Italy was the country less involved in this massive explosion of foreign debt. Finally, this led to loss of competitiveness. My summary is that peripheral economies were doped by external debt. They were doped by credit from poor countries. Vitor Constancio told that in Athens on the 23rd of May of this year. Okay, no, you don't need to applaud me, because there is nothing, it's really trivial. Everything I will say today is really trivial. Any economist knows that, believe me. Not Mario Draghi, believe me. Okay, let's have a look at that. Public expenditure in the Eurozone. Italy is very often blamed by people coming from northern countries, from mosquitoes exporters, for being one of the country with the most profligate public sector. This is simply not true. Have a look at those data. Italy has a public expenditure to GDP ratio which is very close and under the Eurozone average. If you consider primary public expenditure, if you include also the interest, the situation worsens, but not that much. And now also look at another detail. France, Finland, Austria, Belgium, Germany, and Netherlands, the so-called virtuous countries, did expand much more in relation to their GDP than Italy and than the supposed, peaks, Portugal, Greece, Spain, and Ireland. I suppose that you didn't know those data. Many people don't know those data, but those data are important because they are simply showing you that a whole political class, a whole media system is lying to you. And we are in a democracy. Okay? Go ahead. Let's go again. Let's go ahead. A mantra. We are living in a mantra economy. The mantra is that we must become more competitive. Therefore, we must compress labor costs. Why? Because raw materials costs are, in most cases, exogenous, so we must insist on labor costs. We must become more productive. So let's have a look at the historical experience of an advanced economy, which is very often put as an example for us. Why? Because we think that the problem can be solved by becoming the United States of Europe. Let's have a look at what happened in the United States of America. That's an interesting graph in my opinion. In blue, you have labor productivity, and in red, you have real wages. The indexes going from 1890 to 2007, namely to the beginning of the crisis. And what you see that there were periods in which productivity grew faster than real wages, especially at the end of the sample. If we believe in the mantra, that should have been a period of prosperity. Why? Because a country where productivity grows while real wages stagnate becomes more competitive. Now have a look at this table. I took the average growth rates. I know we are in a political institution and numbers perhaps are not very welcome, but it pays to have a little look at those data. You see, I stressed it in red the two periods in which labor productivity grew faster than real wages. The first period was from 1919 to 1932, namely in the eve of the Wall Street crash. The second period was from 1971 to 2011, namely in the eve of the Lehman crash. And we had real wages growing faster than productivity in the New Deal period in the United States, and we had real wages growing at the same rate as labor productivity after World War II, in the period in which the United States liquidated the massive amounts of war debt that were accumulated in order to free Europe from, you know what. Okay? So the question is, why do things go wrong when we behave well? Why we do have a crisis at the end of the period in which we are so competitive? And there is a simple answer. Because capitalism works if there is enough aggregate demand. You do not produce in order to produce, you produce in order to sell. The problem is that if you repress wages, demand has to be financed through indebtedness. Yeah, okay, thank you. If you repress wages, demand has to be financed through indebtedness. And there are many kinds of indebtedness that you can use for that purpose. If you are Keynesian, you may perhaps wish to use public debt. And this happened in the United States. It may seem ironic, but it happened under the Republican rule of Reagan. But it's also happened in Italy. If you are, so to speak, a right-wing economist, you might appreciate private debt, which is, oh yes, free up for capital movements, let's finance work. If you are German, you will use someone else's debt. Maybe a mercantilist policy. Lend money to the other people and have the other people buying our goods and repress wages at home. And this is what Germany did. And it's very clever. I don't contest that, but it leads to an unstable system. And we are now paying the price for that instability. The fall of wage share in the period of the third globalization was a general phenomenon all around the world. You have the data for use in the United States, Germany, France, Italy. The most important fall from 1991 and 2007 was in Germany, -8%, and in Italy, -5%. But everywhere we have that. The problem is that wage repression is sometimes it's a beggar thy neighbor policy. Because you make wage dumping in order to become more competitive and to sell more abroad. But it is always a beggar thyself policy, because wage repression destroys the domestic market. And destroying the domestic market goes against the logic of the European Union. Why? Because as Alberto, who teaches at Harvard University, not at the Gabriele D'Annunzio University, put it very clearly in 1997 when he was against the euro. The main benefit of economic union is to enjoy of a large domestic market which can act as a buffer from external shocks. I mean, there is recession somewhere in the world, but you will continue to grow because you have enough demand at home if you are a big market. Now, this did not happen in the Eurozone. Why? Because it was managed as a zero-sum game, where what Germany won was lost by the southern countries, as Claudio has so clearly explained. And now we are going from a zero-sum game to a negative-sum game. I mean, the euro is a walking dead. And you see that in that graph that was published in the Washington Post. You see that after the shock, the Lehman shock, the United States, the euro area, and Japan fell together. Then they resumed growth. Then there was Fukushima in Japan and Mario Monti in Italy and the Troika in the Eurozone. Fukushima, the tsunami lasted a day, and afterward Japan resumed growth. The Troika is still in power in Europe, and what is really frightening is that this walking dead is walking in the wrong direction. You know, it should go up and it's going down. Mind that graph. But what is really sad from an academic economist point of view is all that was foreseen by economic theory. And we know very well that politicians decided to take a decision that was against economic logic. Because by hindering or altering the functioning of the market, the single currency has perverse effects on both the public and the private sectors of both weak and strong member countries. You should never forget that, because all these effects are and were well known They are less evident for strong countries, but they are still there. And it is for that reason, for the perverse effect on strong countries, that I believe that the euro will quite soon come to an end. What are the reverse effects on weak countries? It is quite the contrary of what was told us, namely that a strong currency would have, a discipline effect on the public sector. The economic literature tells us that things go exactly the other way around. Why? Because if you adopt a fixed exchange rate and your government make too expansionary a fiscal policy, you don't have any effect on the forex market, so the exchange rate is fixed. If instead the exchange rate is flexible, once the country engages in a too expansionary monetary fiscal policy, it will get indebted with the rest of the world, and the exchange rate will devaluate. In that case, the depreciation of the exchange rate gives to the markets an immediate signal that something is going wrong. Why on earth did people continue to lend money to Greece at a huge rate, some 10% of Greece GDP for years and years? Because Greece was credible. Why? Because it had the euro, it had a fixed exchange rate, and there was no signal that could come from the market that things were going wrong. This is the problem. And these were Tornel and Velasco that explained this on the Journal of Monetary Economics. It's not the Pravda or any journal of a little pro-Italian province. It's a leading journal for monetary economics, of course, published by Elsevier. There is another problem that was stressed by Martin Feldstein on the Journal of Policy Modeling, and it is that if you adopt a single currency, you will have more or less a single interest rate, and that interest rate will be too low for weak countries, because we are now blamed by Germany for having enjoyed too easy credit conditions. That's true, but that's the very argument against the logic of the euro, because different countries must have different interest rates in order to well manage their economies. By the way, also the private sector in weak countries has an incentive to take too much debt. And this is basically what Vito Constancio taught at the beginning of my presentation. And this is an argument that was put forward very clearly by Roberto Frenkel and Martin Rapetti on the Cambridge Journal of Economics some 4 years ago. But there are also perverse effects on strong countries. This is important because if you remove the exchange rate risk and the exchange rate signals, the private financial institution of strong countries will lend too much abroad. German banks lend too much abroad. I mean, you cannot take too much debt if someone is not lending too much. Have you ever tried to get some money from your banks? Okay, you know that. But there is another bad incentive that comes from the single currency, because the single currency is too weak for northern countries, as Claudio has explained very clearly. And this means that it allows countries like Germany to make huge profit out of undervalued countries. And for that reason, those countries do not have incentive to invest anymore. And the private sector, the private non-financial sector of strong countries will invest too little at all. And this is Hans Werner Sinn, a German economist, that made this argument. It's not, an envious American economist or lazy Italian economist. It's a strong, very professional and very clever, I really admire him, German economist. Have a look at the data. Germany is the country with the lowest investment to GDP ratio in Europe in the period from 1999 to 2007. So forget the fairy tale of Germany being competitive because it invests a lot. Please do forget that. Okay? Go on. What did Germany? Germany did a very standard beggar neighbor income policy. You know, we are blamed because we didn't do structural reform. What are structural reforms? Paying the worker a little less. Germany did that, starting in 2002. You have the graph of the wage share. In black, it's Germany, and you see what did the wage share from 2002 and 2007 in Germany after the so-called structural reforms put forward by Hartz, who made them. Well, he had, by the way, had his math very similar to that of Berlusconi, but this is another question. I will not enter into gossip. Have a look at that. It's impressive. So by lowering wages, they became competitive. Why? Because the exchange rate was fixed, and we'll come on that later. But beggar-than-ever income policies have hidden social costs. Look at that. This is a graph of income inequality in Germany. Have a look at how fast it rises after the adoption of the so-called structural reforms. So there is a growing inequality in Germany. It is the country where inequality grew much in the Eurozone period. There is a growing poverty, there is a growing divide between West and East, and between structured, formal workers and workers with informal contracts. So there are two necessary conditions to overcome the crisis. The first one is to harmonize the member countries' labor markets by bringing, again, real wage in line with labor productivity everywhere in the Eurozone. Because if a country plays the dirty game of Germany by compressing real wage dynamics under productivity dynamics, things will suddenly come to an end. We will have to re-regulate the European financial markets, and we have to dismantle the euro now for both short-run reasons and long-run reasons. Let's take this point. Have a look at the red line here. The red line here is 1 century of sovereign debt in advanced countries, and we have two peaks. The first one, well, look at this period. This is a period where, as I told you before, advanced countries liquidated the huge debt that had been accumulated because of World War II. It is a period that lasts from about 1946 to 1971. Have a look at now at that. This is a current period. You see that we had a sudden rise of public debt. Why? Because the need to save the private finance imposed to the government a huge effort that translated into a massive sudden accumulation of public debt. Now, we are now, as far as public debt is concerned, in a situation which is very similar to that we experienced at the end of World War II. What happened during the period in which the first time we reached such a high peak in sovereign debt? What was done by the government? Two things. The first one was already seen before. This is a period in which real wages grew in line with productivity. So we had a fair distribution of income. And the second thing is that we regulated financial markets. Let's take this point. The liquidation of the huge post-World War II debt was made possible by two things. The first one is what economists call financial repression, and would call financial regulation. Carmen Reinert and Belén Sprancia make this point in their paper of 2011. It's not 2012, sorry. The second point is that in that period, we had a fair distribution of revenues. We had capitalism working as capitalism pretends or claims to work by paying the factor of production according to their productivity. This made possible growth, and this made possible the liquidation of debt, because any problem of debt is always a problem of the growth of income. What does financial repression mean? We should introduce, for instance, some kind of Glass-Steagall regulation by separating commercial bank from investment banks. The German model of universal bank did not work. We should rethink central banking. Central bank independence has been finger-pointed by some economists like Joseph Stiglitz or Axel Joffre, which is less known to the general public, but is a very important Keynesian economist, as a threat to democracy. What does it mean, a fair distribution of income? Well, there are proposals for that. I take one from a German economist just to show you that German people are not my enemies. They are my friends, because we are all living in the same world. And we are living in this world for a very short life. And there is no point in making this short life a bad life when we have technical means to live much better. Fair distribution of income means that wage must rise. Nominal wage, I mean the wage, contractual wage, should rise at the rate of growth of productivity plus an objective of inflation, if we decide to keep the same inflation target. This is what fair distribution of revenues mean. Well, dismantle the euro. The euro is a walking dead. Okay. If you notice the declaration of Jens Weidmann, the president of the Bundesbank, when he told that the next stress test of the banking sector will be performed by allowing different coefficient risks for sovereign bonds. If you understand what does it mean, this means that the whatever it takes statement by Mario Draghi was a bluff. Because if Mario Draghi was right, government bonds would be riskless. Okay? And that means that in Germany, some people are getting sick of that situation and want to dismantle the euro. And the declaration of Hans Werner saying that Berlusconi was sacked because he was preparing a euro exit from Italy are also very telling in this respect. Zin has always said that southern countries should go out of the euro. And he's a German economist. And if he makes such a statement, this is a very important political signal. There are short-run reasons for dismantling the euro, because exchange rates allows for a symmetric rebalancing of the huge imbalances that have been accumulated during the euro period. And there are also long-run reasons. In order to integrate their economy, the European countries cannot give up two features of the flexible exchange rate. The signaling feature, namely the fact that the flexible exchange rate gives a quick and clear signal to the market if something is going wrong in a country. And the enforcement feature. What I mean by enforcement? Well, James Smith told us very clearly in 1957, before winning the Nobel Prize in 1977. So it is an important economist, which was forgotten. But in my book, I end my political proposal by using a paper which was written in the same year in which the treaties of Rome were signed. What says Mead? He says that if some European national governments are going to use monetary or budgetary policy for purposes of domestic stabilization, if, for example, look at that sentence, in their present situation of balance of payment surplus, the German authorities are nevertheless going to use monetary policy to prevent inflation, and with this desire to avoid the use of quantitative import restrictions or quotas or tariffs anyway, a greater use of the weapon of exchange rate variation will have to be made. Exchange rate variation is a defensive weapon against non-cooperative behavior of the member states of an economic union. And it is the most effective because in front of such a huge wage dumping policies as the one practiced by Germany with Hartz reform, its exchange rate, its nominal exchange rate, would have appreciated. Okay, you are the good guy. Okay, you made reform. Oh yeah, that's good. So your goods are more affordable. Well, we will buy them. Wow, wonderful. You are several countries. Oh, bravo. Clap the hands. But if in order to buy German goods, we had to buy German currency, the German currency would appreciate, and that would establish an equilibrium. And it is a market. We are living in a Soviet system where we are planned the most important price for a country, which is the price of its birthday. What should you do as European member of the Parliament? Since by defending the euro at any cost, sorry, there is a why there should be a T, this Commission is destroying any prospect of survival of the European Union, because this is what is happening. I will give you the senior for a much-deserved applause. You should exercise your power of censure and force the European Commission to resign, because it's destroying Europe. And this is not what the European Commission is supposed to do. You may have the numbers to do so now, but after the next elections, things could change, as I had foreseen 2 years ago. And if you do not signal your dissent for this situation, you take a political risk, and you will probably have to pay a political cost. Once again, and good luck.